Right now, at this exact second, there is a Fortune 500 company being systematically dismantled from the inside out.
Oh, absolutely. It's happening as we speak.
Right. Intellectual property is being copied, financial databases are being encrypted, and these massive ransom demands are being routed through decentralized cryptographic ledgers. But, the most unsettling part of this entire ongoing siege is that the attacker executing it doesn't even have a heartbeat.
Yeah, there's no human element anymore.
Exactly. There is no rogue genius in a dark hoodie furiously typing on a mechanical keyboard in some basement. The entity orchestrating this breach, it doesn't sleep, it doesn't feel fatigue, and most importantly, it never requires a human being to touch a keyboard.
We are looking at a fundamental shift in the actual physics of digital security. The historical model of human versus human conflict in cyberspace, that has completely collapsed.
Gone.
Right, it's gone. What is replacing it is this environment of machine-to-machine warfare. And it operates at a speed and a scale that, honestly, biological cognition just cannot comprehend.
Welcome to MediaGenX and welcome to today's deep dive. Today, we're pulling from a massive stack of recent intelligence. Specifically, we've got a collection of enterprise cybersecurity white papers, some heavily detailed actuarial risk reports from major insurance underwriters, and declassified geopolitical threat assessments.
It's a heavy stack today.
It really is. And our goal is to unpack the reality of what the intelligence community is currently calling agentic cyber-warfare. We're going to trace the exact anatomy of a fully autonomous network breach, examine this massive hidden financial liability lurking inside modern corporate offices, something called shadow AI, and then, as always on this show, we're going to follow the money.
Always follow the money.
Right. We want to see how capital is being radically reallocated as legacy defense systems become completely obsolete. And finally, we will look into the dark side of this, specifically the chilling physical implications of autonomous worms falling into the hands of nation-states.
Because understanding this landscape, it is critical.
Yeah.
The barrier to entry for executing catastrophic digital damage has, it's effectively fallen to zero.
Wow. Zero.
Yeah. The cost structures have completely inverted, and the enterprise perimeter, as we historically understood it, it just no longer exists.
So to understand the magnitude of that inversion, we really need to look at the baseline. Before we talk about the machines, let's establish the economics of how traditional cybercrime functioned over, say, the last 20 years. The threat intelligence reports we're looking at, they detail a highly structured human-led supply chain. It wasn't just one guy guessing passwords.
No, not at all. It's an entire industry. The labor theory of value absolutely applied to cybercrime. A sophisticated criminal syndicate operating out of, say, Eastern Europe or Southeast Asia, it functioned remarkably like a traditional corporation.
Like they had HR and payroll.
Pretty much, yeah. If they wanted to target a mid-sized healthcare network, the operation required immense organizational friction. It required highly specialized human capital.
So break down that human capital for us. What did the actual org chart of a cyber syndicate look like in that pre-AI era?
Well, you would start with reconnaissance specialists. These were actual individuals employed solely to manually scrape public data.
Just clicking around online.
Exactly. They would spend days just combing through LinkedIn to build out the target company's organizational chart. They're identifying the IT director, the chief financial officer, the database administrators. They gathered the raw intelligence.
Okay, so they have the names, then what?
That raw data was then handed over to the social engineers, the phishing experts. Their entire job was to craft highly convincing, psychologically manipulative emails. So perhaps impersonating a vendor that the hospital uses and requesting an urgent update to payment routing numbers.
Right, but even if someone falls for that, like if they actually click the link, the syndicate still needs the actual software weapon, right?
Yeah, they need the payload. And that brings in the payload developers. These were elite, highly compensated software engineers who operated on dark web forums. They wrote the actual malware.
The actual code doing the damage.
Right. The code designed to bypass the hospital's specific antivirus configuration, establish a backdoor, and then encrypt the SQL databases. And finally, assuming all of that deployment was successful, the syndicate employed human negotiators.
Wait, actual negotiators, like a hostage situation?
Exactly like that. These were people whose sole function was to interface with the hospital's crisis management team, haggle over the ransom amount, provide proof of life for the encrypted files, and then facilitate the really complex laundering of the cryptocurrency payment.
You are describing a process that is just fraught with human limitations. I mean, you have payroll, communication delays, time zones, people taking weekends off. The reports indicate an operation of that scale typically took about 3 weeks of continuous, coordinated human effort.
3 solid weeks, yeah.
And if the target hospital's IT team happened to patch the server vulnerability on, I don't know, day 14,
the entire 3-week investment was wiped out. Gone. The human attackers had to stop, regroup, and essentially start from scratch to find a totally new exploit. It was a grinding war of attrition between human exhaustion on the defense side and human ingenuity on the attack side.
But the architecture of that threat, it has changed entirely. The white papers introduce a concept that fundamentally rewrites those economics. They call it the agentic swarm. Now, we need to be very precise here because, people hear AI and they immediately think of a chatbot.
Right, they think of ChatGPT.
Exactly. They think of prompting a large language model to draft an email. But the sources make it explicitly clear that an agentic swarm is not a human using an AI tool.
No, the defining characteristic here is autonomy. An agentic swarm is a decentralized network of highly specialized artificial intelligence agents, and they are communicating with each other in real time, completely devoid of human oversight.
So no human in the loop at all.
None. The human operator simply sets a high-level abstract goal. So for example, they might type, infiltrate this regional energy provider and extract their customer billing database. And that's it. The swarm dynamically calculates and executes all the necessary intermediate steps to achieve that objective.
That is wild. Let's really dissect the anatomy of this swarm, because the enterprise risk reports, they categorize the swarm into 5 distinct, specialized AI agents working in concert. I want to spend some time on how these agents actually function on a technical level, starting with the first one, which they call the Scout.
So the Scout is tasked entirely with reconnaissance, just like those human researchers we talked about. But it operates at the speed of computation. Where a human might spend a week mapping a company's perimeter, the Scout agent ingests the target's entire digital footprint in seconds.
Just seconds.
Literally seconds. It programmatically queries every public code repository, like GitHub, looking for repositories linked to the company's engineers. It maps the DNS records, categorizes every subdomain, identifies every cloud storage bucket.
It's leaving no stone unturned.
Exactly. It catalogs the version number of every piece of software the company exposes to the internet, down to the specific plugins running on their public web servers.
It's basically mapping the entire surface area of the fortress, looking for any loose brick. And once it builds that comprehensive map, it hands the data to the second entity, which the sources call the architect. What exactly is the architect doing with that raw intelligence?
The architect operates as the strategic core of the swarm. It takes this massive, unstructured data set generated by the Scout, and it cross-references it against global databases of known software vulnerabilities, things like the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures Database, or CVE.
So it's looking for a match.
Right. It is mathematically searching for intersections. It looks at the Scout's data, sees that, okay, the target company is running version 4.1 of a specific database application, and it instantly correlates that with a known vulnerability for that exact version. It determines the precise vector of attack without any human trial and error.
So the Scout maps the fortress. The architect identifies the specific weakness in the gate. Which leads us to the third agent. And I have to say, this is the one that seems to completely break traditional cybersecurity models. The coder. Historically, human hackers would buy pre-written malware or just modify existing scripts, right?
Yeah, mostly copy and paste with a few tweaks. But the coder agent doesn't do that at all. The coder dynamically authors a completely bespoke, unique piece of malware from scratch in real time. The cybersecurity industry refers to this as polymorphic malware.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanics of polymorphism for a moment, because this is huge. Why does dynamically writing the code make such a massive difference? I mean, my understanding of traditional corporate antivirus software is that it works basically like a massive, constantly updated blacklist.
That's a good way to put it.
Like the antivirus vendor identifies a piece of malware out in the wild, they analyze it, they create a unique digital fingerprint or a hash of that file, and they add it to the list. So if that exact file tries to run on my computer, the antivirus sees the matching hash and just kills it.
Right. That is the exact mechanism of static signature-based detection. And it is precisely why the coder agent renders it totally obsolete. Because the coder writes the malware in real time for this specific attack. The resulting executable file has a digital signature that has literally never existed before in the history of the internet.
Wow, so there's no hash to find.
Exactly. The underlying function of the code, like to encrypt a hard drive, for example, that remains the same. But the structure, the variable names, the sequence of operations, they are entirely novel.
The traditional antivirus is looking for a known fingerprint, but the AI is generating a weapon with no fingerprints at all.
The defensive system is relying on historical records to fight a dynamic, real-time creator. It just doesn't work. The antivirus scans the incoming file, checks its massive list of known threats, finds no match, and assumes the file is benign. The coder bypasses the perimeter simply by being unprecedented.
Which clears the path for the fourth agent, the infiltrator.
Right, the infiltrator is the execution engine. It takes that polymorphic payload generated by the coder, and it physically navigates the internal architecture of the target network. It bypasses internal segmentation, elevates its own user privileges, and physically delivers the malware to the critical servers identified earlier by the architect.
And finally, once the system is compromised, the fifth agent activates, which is the broker. And the broker automates the extraction and the extortion.
Yeah, it locates the most highly sensitive data, encrypts the local copies, and then initiates the ransom dialogue. It automatically routes the demanded cryptocurrency payments through decentralized mixers to obscure the financial trail, effectively laundering the funds at machine speed.
So the threat assessments highlight a metric regarding this 5-agent swarm that completely recontextualizes the entire threat landscape. We discussed how a human syndicate required 3 weeks of manual labor to execute a targeted breach. When this exact same sequence, reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, and exfiltration, when that is handed over to an autonomous swarm, the timeline just collapses.
It's terrifying.
The white papers clock the average time from initial reconnaissance to full system encryption at 47 minutes.
47 minutes. 3 weeks of human effort compressed into less than an hour.
But it's not just the speed, right? It is the sheer collapse in operational costs. How does the economic model change when you completely remove the human payroll from the equation?
Well, the economic barrier to entry just evaporates. The human syndicate had to factor in salaries, infrastructure, time off. The cost for the autonomous swarm to execute that 47-minute attack is essentially just the cost of raw computational power.
Which is, what, a few dollars?
We are talking about fractions of a penny in API calls to the underlying language models and logic engines. The cloud compute infrastructure is effectively subsidizing the destruction of enterprise value. An attacker can launch 10,000 bespoke, highly targeted attacks simultaneously for the cost of a cup of coffee.
To really internalize the mechanics of this, I think we need to move away from the theoretical frameworks. One of the enterprise risk reports outlines a really highly detailed, predictive case study of how an agentic swarm infiltrates a modern corporation. They use a hypothetical global logistics firm, which they call Apex Logistics.
Right, the Apex case study is a great example.
Let's walk through this scenario because it demonstrates that the swarm's real power isn't just writing the code, it's understanding context.
So the Apex Logistics scenario begins not with a brute force attack on a firewall, but with a silent, massive ingestion of public data. The Scout agent activates and extends computing cycles, analyzing 5 years of Apex Logistics quarterly earnings calls.
5 years of calls.
Yeah. It processes their public-facing engineering blogs. It scans the commit histories of their software developers on public code repositories.
So it is building a psychological and operational profile of the target. And during this reconnaissance, the AI uncovers a seemingly innocuous piece of information. On a public programming forum, like Stack Overflow, a couple of junior developers from Apex Logistics are complaining. They are frustrated about being forced to maintain a specific, highly outdated legacy API, an application programming interface that the company uses to track maritime shipping containers.
Right. And the swarm's natural language processing models, they parse that sentiment. It actually understands the frustration. It recognizes the term legacy API and flags it immediately as technical debt. The architect agent then cross-references that specific API and confirms that because it is outdated and actively disliked by the development team, it suffers from an unpatched vulnerability.
So the swarm has mathematically located the point of least resistance just by reading a forum post. But the execution phase is what genuinely shocked me when I read this. The AI knows the vulnerability exists, but it doesn't strike immediately. It demonstrates a chilling degree of patience and contextual awareness. It calculates the optimal window for the breach, and it waits until 4:45 p.m. on a Friday.
The AI has modeled the behavioral patterns of enterprise IT departments. It understands that 4:45 p.m. on a Friday represents a critical vulnerability in human cognition.
People are tired.
They are exhausted. The senior cybersecurity staff are logging off or already distracted. The junior analysts taking over the weekend shift are fatigued. The entire organizational immune system is operating at its lowest possible capacity.
So at 4:45 p.m., the infiltrator agent makes its move. It initiates a spear phishing attack against a mid-level manager at Apex Logistics. But again, this isn't a clumsily worded email full of typos asking to reset a password. The AI generates a perfectly formatted notification that flawlessly mimics the company's internal communication platform.
Complete with the correct hex codes for the corporate branding. It looks identical.
Exactly, and the content of the message is where the autonomous generation truly shines. The swarm doesn't use a generic template. Just minutes prior, the AI scraped a public maritime shipping database and identified a real-world active delay occurring at a port in Rotterdam, a port that Apex Logistics actively uses.
Right, it's leveraging reality.
Yes. The phishing message references this specific ongoing delay, utilizing the precise internal jargon the company uses for logistics routing.
So the manager receives a message that perfectly aligns with their immediate reality. It highlights a real-world problem, uses the correct terminology, and creates this subtle sense of urgency right before the weekend.
And the manager, likely exhausted and just trying to clear their queue before heading home, clicks the embedded link to view the fabricated routing document.
And the polymorphic payload executes instantly. But notice the strategic restraint of the swarm here. It does not immediately lock the manager's workstation and display a ransom demand.
Because doing so would trigger automated alerts and wake up the IT staff?
Precisely. Instead, it initiates a phase of lateral movement. The malware quietly establishes a shadow administrative account, burying its credentials deep within the company's Active Directory. And then it just ceases all aggressive activity. For the next 48 hours, through the entire weekend, the agent just listens.
It just sits there.
It just sits there and monitors the network's baseline traffic. It observes which servers communicate with each other and at what volumes. It reads internal emails to identify where the most sensitive, high-value data is currently siloed.
It maps out the location of the company's upcoming mergers and acquisitions data room. It is learning the physics and the heartbeat of the internal network so that when it finally acts, it can camouflage its data extraction as normal background operations.
And by Sunday night at 2 a.m., the swarm executes the final phase. It quietly copies the entirety of the M&A data room, encrypts the outgoing stream, and routes the files out of the network. It then permanently deletes the original files from Apex's servers. And then the broker agent takes over, bypassing the IT department entirely. It uses publicly available data to find the personal cell phone number of the Apex CEO and sends a direct text message demanding a multi-million-dollar ransom in Monero.
Let's pause on Monero for a second, because the financial routing is a crucial part of the threat, especially for our listeners focused on the money side. Why Monero? When most people think of crypto ransoms, they think of Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is a public ledger, right? Anyone can trace the movement of funds from wallet to wallet.
Yeah, Bitcoin is actually terrible for criminals if law enforcement is paying attention. The broker agent demands Monero specifically because it utilizes cryptographic primitives like ring signatures and stealth addresses that obscure both the sender and the receiver.
So it's untraceable.
Unlike Bitcoin, where the flow of capital is transparent, Monero mathematically scrambles the transaction history. The AI demands a currency that effectively breaks the ability of forensic accountants or law enforcement to follow the money.
So the human security team arrives on Monday morning to a completely hollowed out infrastructure. The realization here is that the true danger of agentic cyber-warfare isn't just the speed of the code, it is the contextual intelligence. The AI weaponized the friction of human life, like a delayed shipping container, a tired employee, the time of day. It used the company's own daily operations as the attack vector.
An external AI swarm is a highly coordinated, relentless siege engine. But the threat reports point out a major paradox in modern enterprise security. While corporations spend millions attempting to fortify the external perimeter against these swarms, the most catastrophic data breaches often originate from a vulnerability that requires no infiltration at all.
Which takes us to the second major theme of the intelligence stack, and this is the dark side of corporate efficiency. The threat isn't always breaking down the door. Sometimes the employees are willingly carrying the most sensitive data out the back door and handing it directly to external neural networks. This is the phenomenon known as shadow AI.
Chief information security officers are discovering that their absolute biggest liability is not a North Korean state actor. It is a highly motivated, well-intentioned middle manager trying to optimize their workflow on a Tuesday afternoon.
Think about your own day-to-day for a second. If you have ever taken a dense internal work document, copied the text, and pasted it into a public AI chatbot to summarize it or check the grammar, you have unwittingly participated in this exact vulnerability. Let's break down the actual mechanics of shadow AI and why it represents such a massive hidden liability.
Well, the modern knowledge worker is under immense pressure to increase productivity. When faced with a complex task, the friction of getting approval for an enterprise-grade secure software tool is often just too high. So employees seek out consumer-grade public AI platforms.
For free ones.
The free ones, exactly. Imagine a senior software engineer at a financial tech firm who is struggling to debug a proprietary algorithmic trading script. To save time, they copy 1,000 lines of the company's core intellectual property, paste it into a free public large language model, and prompt the AI to find the error.
Or consider a human resources director who exports an Excel spreadsheet containing the private health insurance data, salaries, and performance reviews of 5,000 employees, uploads it to a free data analysis AI, and asks it to generate a summary report for the board meeting.
In both of those scenarios, the employees believe they are simply using a calculator to work faster. But structurally, they are taking the company's most closely guarded trade secrets and strictly regulated, personally identifiable information, and voluntarily transferring it to third-party servers. Servers governed by consumer terms of service that the corporation has not vetted.
And the risk goes beyond just storing the data on someone else's server. We have to talk about how these language models actually operate and learn. Depending on the terms of service of that free public tool, the data pasted into the prompt box doesn't just disappear when the browser window closes.
No, not at all. The fundamental architecture of many public neural networks involves continuous learning. The inputs provided by users can be absorbed into the model's training weights. The AI literally learns from the proprietary code the engineer pasted in.
So what's the consequence of that?
The severe implication is that, maybe months later, a developer at a rival firm could query that same public AI with a similar coding problem, and the model might simply regurgitate your company's highly classified algorithmic trading script as the solution.
Wow! The intellectual property hasn't just been leaked, it has been permanently woven into the fabric of a public tool available to competitors. But the white papers outline an even more insidious vector for shadow AI. It's not just employees voluntarily pasting text into chatbots. It is the massive proliferation of the third-party spyware extension.
Oh, the browser extensions. The market is currently flooded with these AI productivity extensions. Plugins that embed themselves directly into your web browser. They promise to dramatically optimize your workday by automatically summarizing long email threads, drafting replies, organizing your calendar.
To deliver on that promise, these extensions require aggressive permissions. When an employee clicks install, they are often granting that extension, utilizing OAuth protocols, deep read and write access to their entire corporate environment. The extension needs to read the inbox to summarize the emails. It requests access to the corporate Slack channels, the internal document repositories, the shared calendars.
You are taking a third-party startup, often a small team, with a tiny fraction of the enterprise's security budget, and granting them an unrestricted mainline into the central nervous system of your business. The corporation is effectively bugging its own offices in the name of marginal productivity gains.
So the supply chain risk is staggering. The attackers don't even need to target the heavily defended Fortune 500 company.
Right, why bother?
They target the lightly defended startup that makes the calendar extension. Once they compromise that startup, they have a master key to read every internal memo, every strategic planning document, and every financial forecast of the massive enterprise client.
The concept of a corporate perimeter is completely dissolved in this scenario. The firewall is irrelevant. The actual perimeter of a modern enterprise is the behavioral discipline of its employees. When highly regulated data, like the health insurance spreadsheets we mentioned, is uploaded to unvetted third-party servers, the corporation triggers immediate violations of frameworks like GDPR or SPA.
And the legal liability is a ticking time bomb. We are talking about the potential for catastrophic regulatory fines, massive class action lawsuits, and the total destruction of consumer trust. all initiated because an employee wanted a faster way to read an email thread.
So we arrive at a critical juncture in the analysis. The external perimeter is fundamentally incapable of stopping a polymorphic AI swarm that operates at machine speed and changes its signature every 3 seconds. Simultaneously, the internal perimeter is being actively bypassed by employees leaking data to public models. The historical architectures of defense are failing on both fronts.
Which brings us to the playbook, the operational shift. How does a massive organization actually defend its capital and its data in an environment where human reaction time is completely irrelevant? The risk reports introduced the defense playbook, which they characterize as machine-to-machine warfare.
The most sobering realization for enterprise boards right now is that the human security analyst is obsolete. A human being sitting in a security operations center monitoring a dashboard of network traffic logs cannot physically intercept an agentic swarm.
It is the equivalent of a 17th century sailor standing on the deck of a galleon with a brass telescope, trying to visually track and intercept an incoming hypersonic cruise missile.
That's a great analogy.
It does not matter how highly trained the human is. By the time the photons travel from the monitor to the analyst's retina, by the time the optic nerve transmits the signal to the brain, and the brain recognizes the anomaly, and the physical hand reaches for the mouse to click quarantine server, the battle has been over for millions of computational cycles. The data has already been encrypted and routed through the crypto mixers.
Exactly. Because the speed of the attack has vastly outpaced biological cognition, the defense must become fully algorithmic. You can only fight an autonomous AI swarm with a defensive AI swarm. This necessitates a complete teardown of the traditional network architecture, moving away from what the industry calls the castle and moat model toward zero-trust architecture.
The castle and moat analogy is crucial to understanding why old systems fail. Historically, a company built a massive, thick stone wall around its network, the firewall. The IT department acts as the guards at the drawbridge, checking passwords. But the fundamental flaw of the castle and moat model is that once an entity is inside the walls, it is implicitly trusted.
Right, if you are logged into the corporate Wi-Fi or if you have a valid user account, the network assumes you belong there. You have free reign to walk the hallways, open doors, access the databases.
And as we saw in the Apex Logistics case study, the AI swarm bypasses the moat by stealing the identity of a trusted manager. Once it is inside the castle, the implicit trust model allows it to freely initiate lateral movement and map the M&A data room. Zero trust architecture completely inverts this paradigm. Zero trust operates on the paranoid assumption that the castle is already breached. It assumes hostile actors are currently inside the perimeter.
Always.
But if the system assumes everything is hostile, how does anyone actually do their job? How does data flow?
Through continuous cryptographic verification at a highly granular level. In a zero-trust environment, successfully logging in at 9 a.m. grants you absolutely nothing at 9 to 5 a.m. Every single time a user, a device, or a microservice attempts to access a new application, open a database, or even execute a line of code, the system demands cryptographic proof of identity.
It's not just flashing an ID badge at the front door. It's having a retinal scan and a background check conducted every single time you try to turn a doorknob inside the building, constantly in the background.
And the verification goes far beyond just checking a password or token. The defensive AI is constantly analyzing the behavioral physics of every entity on the network. It establishes a highly detailed baseline for what normal operation looks like for specific users. It analyzes typing cadence, the specific hours a user typically accesses certain databases, and the volume of data they normally query.
So if the AI swarm compromises a user account and attempts to execute its payload, the defensive AI notices the behavioral anomaly immediately.
Precisely. If an account that typically downloads 5 megabytes of PDF files during business hours suddenly attempts to query a gigabyte of encrypted financial data at 3 a.m., the defensive AI does not generate an alert for a human analyst to review in the morning. It autonomously severs the connection, isolates the compromised server from the rest of the network, and revokes all cryptographic keys associated with that session, all within a matter of milliseconds.
And the intelligence white papers outline an even more aggressive defensive posture built on top of zero trust, a concept called moving target defense. Because we know the attacking swarm, specifically the scout agent, relies on mapping the network to find vulnerabilities.
Right. The attacker needs a static map to plot a trajectory. Moving target defense ensures the map is never static.
The analogy that helps visualize this. Imagine the AI swarm is an intruder trying to draw a floor plan of your corporate headquarters so it can find the vault. Moving target defense is like designing a building where the hallways, the doors, and the stairwells randomly rearrange their physical locations every 3 seconds while the intruder is walking through them.
It's brilliant. On a technical level, the defensive AI is continuously mutating the attack surface. It is rapidly shuffling IP addresses, dynamically rotating cryptographic keys, and randomly changing the memory allocation of applications on the servers. The ephemeral infrastructure might spin up a container to handle a process and then destroy it 3 seconds later.
So the reconnaissance data the scout agent gathered 5 seconds ago is completely obsolete by the time the architect attempts to analyze it.
The attacking AI attempts to deploy its payload to a specific IP address or memory sector, but that target just no longer exists. The entire network topology has shifted. This structural mutation violently disrupts the swarm's operational loop. It forces the attacking AI to constantly restart its reconnaissance phase.
Which introduces friction back into the attacker's economic model.
Exactly. By forcing the swarm into a perpetual loop of mapping and remapping a shifting environment, the defense forces the attacker to rapidly burn through their computational budget. The swarm either exhausts its resources or, in its frantic attempts to map the shifting network, it generates enough anomalous noise to be permanently isolated by the zero-trust behavioral monitors.
It's an incredible conceptual framework, but we really have to look at the macroeconomic reality of this. Upgrading a Fortune 500 company from a legacy castle and moat architecture to a continuous zero-trust framework with AI-driven moving target defense, that is not a software patch. It is not an update you download over the weekend.
No, it requires the total demolition and replacement of decades of legacy IT infrastructure. The capital expenditure required to re-architect global corporate networks to this standard is staggering.
Which naturally leads us to the financial implications of this intelligence stack, the money-first approach. Because when you require the wholesale replacement of global infrastructure, massive amounts of capital are forced into motion. I need to examine the wealth playbook here. How does this shift in the fundamental nature of digital warfare dictate the flow of enterprise capital?
Well, the historical precedent is clear. Whenever the underlying technology of warfare undergoes a paradigm shift, the military-industrial complex experiences a violent period of wealth destruction and subsequent consolidation.
We can look at naval warfare in the early 20th century. The corporations that possessed the infrastructure to build massive, heavily armored steel battleships, they were the dominant monopolies of their era. But when the physics of war changed, when air power, aircraft carriers, and guided missiles emerged, the heavily armored battleship became a massive, slow-moving target.
A liability, really.
Right. The companies that refused to adapt, that kept building battleships, saw their valuations completely collapse. The wealth transferred entirely to the aerospace firms and the technology contractors building the new asymmetric weapons.
And we are witnessing the exact same structural wealth transfer in the cybersecurity sector today. The legacy cybersecurity firms, the massive publicly traded household names whose business models are entirely predicated on selling static firewalls and signature-based antivirus software, they are the battleship builders of the digital age.
Because their core product is mathematically incapable of stopping a polymorphic autonomous swarm.
Therefore, their utility to the enterprise is rapidly approaching zero. As corporate boards and CISOs realize that their legacy contracts offer zero protection against agentic threats, you will see a severe compression in the revenue growth of these legacy firms. Their historical valuations, which are modeled on the assumption of continuous subscription renewals for outdated paradigms, will collapse. They represent significant capital traps for investors who do not understand the underlying technological shift.
So if the legacy battleship builders are hemorrhaging capital, where is that capital flowing? The risk reports identify 3 primary vectors of immense value creation, the new toll booths of the algorithmic era. Let's break down where the capital is concentrating. Vector 1 is identity and access management infrastructure.
Right. In a zero-trust architecture where the network constantly assumes it is under attack, identity becomes the only actual perimeter. Because an AI swarm can perfectly mimic the network traffic of a human employee, traditional passwords are useless. The enterprise must deploy infrastructure capable of continuous, unbreakable cryptographic and behavioral verification.
We are talking about the firms engineering the foundational plumbing of identity. The companies building advanced passkey infrastructure, biometric hardware tokens, and the behavioral analytics engines that monitor typing cadence and access patterns.
These firms are positioning themselves as indispensable utilities. Every corporation, government agency, and financial institution on the planet will be forced to route their operations through these identity verification systems. It becomes a mandatory toll booth for digital existence.
Vector 2 is the emergence of AI-native security operations centers, or SOCs.
These are the agile, heavily capitalized startups engineering the autonomous digital immune systems we discussed earlier. They carry no legacy technical debt. They are not trying to retrofit an old firewall with an AI chatbot. They are building defense swarms from the foundational code up, trained entirely on the physics of network behavior.
These are the systems capable of executing moving target defense and isolating compromised servers in milliseconds without waiting for a human command.
And from a capital allocation perspective, the pricing power of these AI-native defense firms is virtually limitless. When a CEO is presented with the reality that an agentic swarm can steal their core intellectual property in 47 minutes and that their current human-led security team is biologically incapable of stopping it, price becomes completely irrelevant. The enterprise will pay whatever premium is demanded to deploy an autonomous immune system.
And that brings us to Vector 3, which is perhaps the most ruthless capital mechanism in the entire intelligence stack: cyber insurance and actuarial data. Now, on the surface, this seems counterintuitive. If autonomous breaches are becoming this fast and this destructive, wouldn't cyber insurance companies face an avalanche of claims that bankrupt them? The legacy actuarial models must be completely broken.
Oh, the legacy models are absolutely broken. If an underwriter is pricing cyber risk based on an annual questionnaire filled out by a human IT director, they will be wiped out by the influx of claims. But the intelligence reports highlight how the surviving cyber insurance firms are pivoting to become the ultimate arbiters of corporate security.
How do they actually mitigate the risk of these autonomous swarms, though?
By fundamentally changing how they audit their clients. The smart insurers are deploying their own AI actuaries and mandating the installation of proof of security APIs within the client's network.
An API that constantly reports back to the insurance company.
Yes. The insurer's AI is continuously pinging the client's defense systems, mathematically verifying their zero-trust posture, their patch levels, and their behavioral monitoring capabilities in real time. The risk assessment is no longer an annual survey. It is a 24/7 algorithmic audit.
And the financial leverage here is immense. If the client's defense AI goes offline, or if they fail to implement a critical patch, what happens?
The insurer's AI detects the vulnerability instantly. The system dynamically responds by either instantly skyrocketing the client's insurance premiums to reflect the new risk profile, or, in severe cases, autonomously revoking the coverage entirely until the vulnerability is closed.
A Fortune 500 company cannot legally or functionally operate without liability coverage. If the insurance is revoked, the board of directors is exposed to catastrophic personal and corporate liability.
Which means the cyber insurance firms, armed with real-time actuarial data, they evolve from passive underwriters into active, ruthless gatekeepers. They enforce the security standards globally because they hold the ultimate financial leverage. It is a mandatory, high-margin, recurring revenue model backed by the explicit threat of corporate extinction.
The structural wealth transfer is clear. The capital is fleeing static defense and pouring into algorithmic identity, autonomous immune systems, and dynamic risk underwriting. But we need to transition away from the corporate financial models now, because the intelligence stack contains a section that moves beyond extortion and ransom. We have to look at the dark side of this technology.
Geopolitical implications.
Right. What happens when these autonomous swarms are deployed outside the corporate sphere by entities whose primary motivation is not capital extraction, but geopolitical destruction?
This is where the threat assessments become deeply alarming. We have focused on criminal syndicates utilizing swarms to steal data and demand Monero. But the same underlying agentic architecture is actively being developed and deployed by highly resourced nation-states. And a nation-state does not care about encrypting a database for ransom. They care about degrading the physical and operational capacity of their adversaries.
To contextualize this shift, let's look at the history of state-sponsored cyber warfare. The classic example that defined the previous era was Stuxnet.
Stuxnet was a highly sophisticated computer worm discovered around 2010, widely believed to be a joint US and Israeli operation designed to sabotage Iran's nuclear program.
And it was revolutionary because it was one of the first times code crossed over into the physical realm. It specifically targeted the SCADA systems, the supervisory control and data acquisition systems that manage the physical spinning of the uranium enrichment centrifuges. It caused the centrifuges to spin out of control and physically destroy themselves, all while sending fake telemetry data back to the human operators telling them everything was normal.
But look at the friction involved in Stuxnet. It required massive intelligence gathering, human engineering, zero-day exploits, and physical delivery mechanisms, often relying on someone physically plugging a USB drive into a highly air-gapped network. Furthermore, it was a static weapon. It was a highly specific logic bomb designed for a highly specific facility, waiting dormant for the exact conditions to be met before executing its payload.
The intelligence reports emphasize that agentic cyber-warfare removes those limitations entirely. We are moving from dormant, highly specific logic bombs to active, autonomous, self-replicating AI worms that hunt dynamically through the global supply chain.
The nation-state swarms are designed to fuse the digital and physical worlds autonomously. They do not wait for a human command to execute a pre-programmed sabotage routine. They infiltrate critical infrastructure, learn the operational physics of the environment, and then creatively engineer methods of destruction that a human programmer might never have conceived.
The threat assessments provide examples that are frankly terrifying because of their subtlety. We aren't just talking about a worm that shuts down a power grid, which is obvious and immediately attributes blame. We're talking about an autonomous swarm that infiltrates the network of a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility in a rival nation.
An AI worm designed for long-term strategic degradation.
Exactly. Instead of halting production, the AI worm learns the precise chemical mixing processes. It then subtly alters the chemical ratios by 0.1%. A deviation so minuscule it bypasses human quality control checks. But over a span of years, it systematically degrades the efficacy of the rival nation's drug supply.
Or consider the heavy industry sector. An autonomous worm infiltrates the automated control systems of a steel foundry. It doesn't break the blast furnaces. Instead, it makes microscopic, erratic adjustments to the cooling temperatures during the forging process. It intentionally degrades the tensile strength of the steel being produced.
Steel that is then used to construct the rival nation's bridges, skyscrapers, and naval submarines. Decades of structural decay and catastrophic physical failures, completely undetected, initiated by an algorithm that understood the physics of metallurgy better than the human operators.
This is the reality of algorithmic supremacy. The geopolitical discourse is heavily focused on which nation will develop the most articulate large language model. But the true arms race is occurring in the shadows. The nation that controls the most aggressive, resilient, and autonomous cyber swarms possesses the ability to degrade their adversaries' physical infrastructure and economic base without ever deploying a kinetic weapon or crossing a physical border.
So, if the global digital infrastructure is currently saturated with autonomous swarms capable of subverting supply chains and collapsing enterprise networks in 47 minutes, what is the macroeconomic endgame here? How does the global internet survive this level of continuous automated hostility?
According to the geopolitical models, the open internet, as we have historically conceptualized it, does not survive.
The utopian vision of a borderless, free-flowing digital commons is effectively dead.
For 30 years, the global economy has been built on the architecture of open connectivity. The assumption was that a server in Tokyo should be able to seamlessly exchange data with a laptop in London. But when the open ocean of the internet is populated by apex predators, autonomous swarms hunting for vulnerabilities at machine speed, trust evaporates completely. The risk of open connectivity becomes too high for sovereign nations and massive corporate conglomerates to bear.
So the era of digital globalization fractures.
We are entering an epoch of digital trench warfare. To protect their critical infrastructure and capital, nations and corporations will systematically pull up the drawbridges. The global interconnected internet will segment into heavily fortified, AI-guarded, sovereign internets.
Walled gardens.
Immense, impenetrable walled gardens. Entry into these sovereign networks will not be based on an IP address. It will be strictly gated by continuous biometric, cryptographic, and behavioral identity verification. The open sea of the internet becomes a series of locked-down, militarized lakes, patrolled ceaselessly by defensive AI immune systems.
It is a staggering reality to confront, but recognizing the architecture of this shift is the only way to navigate it. Let's recap the journey we just took through this intelligence stack. Bullet 1. We dismantled the myth of the human hacker, acknowledging that the threat is no longer biological, but a decentralized, polymorphic AI swarm capable of executing a catastrophic breach in 47 minutes.
Bullet 2. We exposed the internal vulnerabilities of shadow AI, where well-meaning knowledge workers inadvertently leak trade secrets and install third-party spyware, dissolving the corporate perimeter from the inside out.
And bullet 3. We tracked the massive reallocation of capital, watching wealth flee the legacy, static defense contractors, and pour into the algorithmic toll booths of the future. The continuous identity verification, AI-native immune systems, and dynamic actuarial underwriting.
And we stared into the geopolitical abyss, moving from the human-engineered sabotage of Stuxnet to the era of autonomous worms actively manipulating the physical infrastructure of the world, driving us toward a fractured landscape of sovereign intranets.
The intelligence is dense, but the core takeaway is absolute. The physics of digital security and capital preservation have fundamentally changed. Whether you are allocating enterprise capital, engineering a network architecture, or simply operating within the digital economy, relying on the paradigms of the human era is a terminal mistake. Which leaves us with one final, deeply polarizing thought to explore. We have spent this hour discussing how Fortune 500 companies and nation-states are forced to deploy autonomous swarms just to survive. We talked about the macro-level fracturing of the open internet, but I want you to scale that down to the micro-level. What does this mean for your own personal digital footprint?
Right. If the environment is too hostile for a billion-dollar enterprise to operate without a digital immune system, how can a biological human expect to navigate it unprotected?
Think about your own daily interactions. If an agentic swarm can map an enterprise network, write custom polymorphic malware, and execute a multi-million-dollar extraction in less time than it takes you to eat lunch, how long will a standard consumer antivirus protect your personal bank accounts? Are we rapidly approaching a future where everyday citizens, you listening to this right now, cannot safely connect to the digital world without employing your own personal AI security swarm? An autonomous, algorithmic bodyguard that inspects every packet of data, every email, and every financial transaction before it reaches your biological perception. The guy in the hoodie in the basement is a relic, but in 10 years, will you need your own swarm of algorithms living in a server in your basement just to safely buy groceries online without your identity being systematically dismantled?
It's a terrifying question.
Mull that over. And let us know your thoughts in the comments. Would you trust a personal AI swarm to manage your entire digital life? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Please subscribe to MediaGenX so you never miss an analysis. Next time, we are unpacking the shadow economy of algorithmic high-frequency real estate trading. As always, a quick reminder that this discussion is for educational exploration of intelligence trends and is not financial or investment advice. Think critically about the hidden automated wars being fought in the servers all around you. Stay curious, stay positioned,